thank you for coming. I want to welcome each one of you here this afternoon to the planning meeting, and also want to say that we are live streaming this meeting, so welcome those who are online watching this meeting. The apologies for this afternoon, I have only one, Councillor Ryan Passault, who is unable to attend the meeting because he's chairing another council meeting. So we accept his apologies. Is there any other apologies, Catherine? No. Okay, thank you. All right, acknowledgement to country. I want to acknowledge the First Nations people. And I also note the fact that the dispossession that happened, the struggles and the resilience of the First Nations people. And I pay respect to the elders, past and present, and for what they're continuing to do in maintaining their culture. Consideration of supplementary items, there is none. Indication of conflict of interest, are there any? No, thank you. Now, committee acting as a planning authority, I'm just going to remind each one of us, you as elected members, we are now acting as planning authority. I have to now put in an item which is missing on the agenda, move a motion to accept the deputations for 421. If someone would move that, please. Thank you, Deputy. All in favor? Aye. Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And then the other item that we have to add here as well is transfer of agenda item. Councillor Lohberger, move, please. Which one would you like to move?
I think the Hampden Road items, I think a lot of people are here for that. So I think we should come forward.
421 to be dealt with first, and then we'll deal with 411 and 412 later. All in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll begin with that item 421, 55 Hampton Road. Now, I just want to make a comment for noting the paper that we have given to us. The expiry date states the 11th of December, and I just want to note that that extension was given to us by the applicant, and hence this meeting today on the 16th. So that expiry date has been taken into account, the fact that we have been given extension. Thank you. Now we have deputation. So what we will do with the deputation, we have each speaker, you'll have 5 minutes to share your points, your arguments, your evidence. And when it's about 4.5 minutes, they will, the bell will ring to say that you have 30 seconds left. And when you finish, then the elected members will have the opportunity to ask questions of you. So just remain sitting in the front when you come, and then we will begin from there. All right, so the first one we have here on the deputation list is the representative Alita Lidowash. Is she here? Please come to the front. Where the mic is. Yeah, out there. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Alita Lidowash. As noted in the recommendation report, this proposal fails 33 of the 60 acceptable solutions and relies heavily on performance criteria. The report concludes that the proposal complies with all performance criteria, but it doesn't. I have spent literally hundreds of hours this year familiarising myself with the relevant laws, both the DA's and the now recommendation report. I have legal training and have been shocked by the claims made. Some contradict each other, some rely on false assumptions, and at other times there is fundamental misapplication of the scheme. I'll now outline some issues regarding height, scale and bulk, heritage, amenity and health. Height. The acceptable solution for height is 8.5 metres. The proposal seeks 11.2. To justify this significant exceedance, the applicant claims compliance with Performance Criteria 2 for height, which requires the development to be comparable to adjoining lots in the residential zone. But instead of comparing itself to the actual adjoining residential properties, which include 4 dwellings, 3 one-storey heritage cottages and 1 1.5, The application compares itself to Jackman and McRoss and D'Angelo's, neither of which are in the residential zone, and Jackman and McRoss is not even adjoining. This is a clear failure to meet this performance criteria. Bulk, scale and heritage. The bulk and scale are fundamentally incompatible with Battery Point. The UDAP raised serious concerns in the earlier DA this year about bulk and scale, visual dominance and incompatibility with the precinct. The report acknowledges that the new DA has not been materially altered and that its visual impact is only marginally reduced. How can you have serious concerns with the original proposal, acknowledge minimal changes have been made, and then recommend this new DA for approval? It does not make sense. Regarding clause 13.8.2p1, requires that the development must not result in detriment to the historic cultural heritage significance of the precinct. The report claims it meets the criteria since efforts have been made to assist with reduction of visual bulk. This does not equate to compliance. It acknowledges the detriment that it would have due to scale. Regarding impact on streetscape of South Street, the report states that the two-storey townhouses will not be visible from South Street and thus will have no adverse impact on the streetscape. But it will, and you can see the images in the DA, which makes it very obvious. P3 requires that it must not be obtrusive in the streetscape. The report states that retaining 43 South Street would protect the streetscape from any adverse impacts of the development. But how could a one-storey cottage protect the streetscape from a two-storey contemporary townhouse directly behind it, let alone the three-storey massive apartment complex? Regarding amalgamation of land parcels, the proposal would result in a massive single lot of 2,025 square metres. The report acknowledges that this will alter the existing pattern development and thus the performance criteria cannot be satisfied. Yet at the end of the report, to justify recommendation for approval, it states all performance criteria are satisfied. They're not. Amenity impacts are grossly understated. Amenity impacts, which include visual dominance, noise, loss of privacy and lived experience, would be huge, especially for us as adjoining properties. The report completely overlooks and disregards this. The noise assessment shows levels would exceed the acceptable solution of 40 decibels overnight. The estimate for the proposal is 43. The performance criteria requires then that noise must not cause environmental harm. The report claims compliance with this criterion based on the assumption that the current levels, which are 45, cause no harm, and so the proposed one won't either. But current levels do cause harm, and I informed Council about this earlier this year. The proposal does not comply with this criterion. The report also puts forward the transition of scale concept in attempt to water down visual dominance impacts. What they're saying is, let us develop a huge complex because we'll also develop another big one, but that's a bit smaller to minimise the impact of our huge building. The reality is, we would be totally boxed in by visual dominance and the impact on privacy and amenity would be huge. Health and contamination. The site is heavily contaminated. The environmental impact assessment highlights the presence of many heavy metals, including lead and mercury. The dust generated would be toxic, and given the massive scale of the car park, the exposure length would be significant. Community should not be subjected to such serious health risks. Councillors, this proposal imposes massive risk on hundreds of residents and businesses, relies overwhelmingly on discretionary standards, many of which are not met, contains factual errors and misapplication of the scheme and code, and defers serious impacts to later stages through conditions. The benefit accrues to 4 developers, the costs are borne by the community. My deep concern is that allowing this proposal to proceed further will cause irreversible harm to heritage, business, health and history. Some risks cannot be mitigated. Councillors, you have authority and the grounds to refuse this application. Exercising this discretion is not anti-development, it is responsible planning. I respectfully urge you to refuse this development application. Thank you for your time and careful consideration.
Remain there and we'll just see if elected members have any questions or clarification they want to seek from you. Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just have to ask my question this way for the recording, if that's okay. You're a resident who lives near the site. Are you aware of any business owners who live near the site who share your concerns?
Absolutely, many. A huge concern I had was that being the adjoining property, I was the only, my family were the only people who received written notification. When we found that out, I went around the neighbourhood asking people if they knew about it. The level of awareness was incredibly low. In fact, Osis across the road, they didn't know about it. Liot across, very close, did not know about it. Jackman and Ross didn't know about it. The Liot owner, Chanel Peratt, is extremely concerned, has been all year. She's been open for 15 months and she has invested heavily in her business and has had anxiety all year, saying that it would absolutely close her down. A small dip, hospitality is so hard at the moment, a small dip in their business would be astronomical. She did bring that up at the community meeting, which was like a week before submissions were due, and the response to her was, you'll get coffee from the tradies. That's nothing. She's a dine-in cafe that relies on the quiet ambience of Hampton Road. The Osis cafe owners are extremely worried. They're in a similar situation. The other big concern is that there's no room for any more cafes on the street, and that's evident by things closing down. So Combi just closed down last week. Jackman and Ross just sold, coincidentally, perhaps. But yeah, it's a real struggle and a huge concern for businesses.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? The Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. So just to follow up to that one, I guess what exactly is the concern in terms of, is there an estimate in the paperwork that you've seen about, or from the consultation with the developer, about the time of construction, the period of construction?
Yeah,
period?
Great question. So, no, unfortunately, I wasn't at the community meeting, but Chanel was very upset afterwards. I was interstate and she rang me up afterwards because there isn't that information in the DA, and I have read all 460 plus pages. Chanel asked the developers to came along and agreed to answer questions, and she said they couldn't give answers. There was just a whole lot of, we don't know yet, which I can understand, but there needs to be some sort of estimate because the businesses don't know, is this going to go on for 3 years, 1 year? How long will excavation go on for? The main concern is excavation of the car park because of the dust, vibration, noise, especially considering the toxic dust. But the noise and vibrational impacts, no one would come to the area. Even if it was just a few months or up to that year, the excavation would put them out of business. And then the livability of, Hampton Road and therefore the precinct would be at significant risk.
And I just want to, just on that issue of the car park, like that obviously came up in, I think you're in an article in the paper today. You didn't really mention much about the concerns about that, the mercury and lead that's from a previous use, is it?
So that's not specified in the DA. So the information about mercury and lead was at the very end of the DA in the environmental impact assessment. Throughout the DA, they only referred to it as it's been identified as a potentially contaminated site. So firstly, it's not potentially, it absolutely is. And the contamination, the main concern is lead. The levels exceed the residential and commercial safety levels. That is detailed in the EIA. And what was the question? Sorry, Anna. What
are some of the concerns around the excavation part?
So a huge concern is the fact that they've only done one site visit. I don't know the depth in which they've done it. So the car park is 8 metres. The samples say 0.5 to 0.6 where they have found these heavy metals. So to dig into that earth with those heavy metals is extremely concerning. When we shared that with families in the area, people were pretty horrified, but it kind of also gave people like, they just won't do it. Like, council surely can't prove that, so it's kind of given a bit of a, I don't know if it's a hope or false hope. But I mean, once visitors find out that too, no visitors coming to the area, it would have massive implications for business and tourism. And we would absolutely have to leave because we've got 2 children on that border. The environmental impact assessment, there's a contamination management plan, something or other, and it states that the neighbouring residential properties would be at risk, and therefore, strict compliance will be followed, but we don't want to have any risk of mercury and lead in our air. We certainly wouldn't be able to do washing. We have a garden, well, it's just bricks at the moment, and we have done nothing to it all year because we've been waiting to hear what will happen here. Because I want to plant a food forest, but we clearly cannot do that if we've got, toxic dust sort of settling on our garden. And when I asked the developers about that, they just said, we don't know yet. Like, we don't know how we're going to excavate. And I said, well, someone mentioned putting chemicals into the ground so that there's no explosive having to be used. But again, chemicals going into the ground will contaminate the surrounding land, and we, again, can't grow food. None of that is addressed at all in the DA in terms of amenity. Amenity is absolutely overlooked for the residents and also for the community. Just the fact that you won't be able to comfortably walk down the street because you'll be scared of inhaling heavy metals. Just not appropriate at all.
Any other questions? Alderman Bloomfield first, and then...
Just a question. Have you had your soil tested in your backyard?
No, we haven't. So I only found out this because I was reading the whole DA. And what was it? When it was released, we got notification one day before we went away for 10 days. So I had 4 days to read it. And it was on the very last day before submissions were due that I read that. And when I did, I was like, oh my God, we have to get our soil tested. Yep. So we absolutely do that.
Councillor Kitsos.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question that you've put in your written submission to Council regarding the number of car parks that are attached to the development, and your opinion, I understand if there are too many that are associated.
Look, the biggest, so I have gotten so involved, not just as an adjoining property, but out of a genuine feeling of responsibility towards the community and the precinct. The community's biggest concern has been the car park, absolutely, because of the impact it would have on the businesses and then just the livability of the street. So in terms of the car park, no one that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to hundreds of people in the community, no one has been anti-development at all. One person, I'll name him, Ian, made a really lovely point that the site has been a pub since 1843 or 46, I think 1843, and so it actually does have historic and cultural significance, whereas the DA and the recommendation report states that it has absolutely none, which is actually a bit of a contradiction because then they try to justify the aesthetics of it by saying that they relate, that they've looked at the old pub to pull features from, but then they've said that it's got no significance. In any event, I agree with Ian, it would be lovely to have a beautiful pub there. The building is quite ugly, but it's not dominating. I think that's the key thing that the community all agree on, that a development could go there, but as long as it's in keeping and as long as there's no car park, because that is the biggest concern. So in keeping with the scheme, and that requires in keeping with the height. So people are very happy for it to be developed, and we'd be absolutely happy to work with the developers. We've been wanting community engagement, but we've had none. So having the community meeting to just answer questions a week before submissions were due, that is not community engagement. That is just answering some questions, and they couldn't answer them. It would be lovely to have a beautiful old looking building put up there, or just a sympathetic, at least, something that is sensitive, something that is not obtrusive, something certainly that wouldn't dominate the heart of the precinct, which this absolutely would if you look at the diagrams. You look at from Arthur's Circus, and the impact that it would have on the view from Arthur's Circus is massive. And the impact from South Street and Hampton Road and DeWitt, like all those iconic streets, it has a huge impact on the streetscape. Does that answer your question, Gemma? Sorry, yeah.
Councillor Bill Harvey.
Thanks, Alita. So with the car park, what's your concerns, apart from the quarrying, which is a major concern for the community there, what's the concerns with car parking on the site?
Look, the fact that it goes underground, that's exactly right. So, if they had, the Prince of Wales at the moment it's a huge site and it has ample parking around it. So if they brought the building within scale, within an appropriate scale that does match the, what do they call it, the heritage I'm not sure what the word is, but the scale of it, if that was reduced, the height was reduced, they'd have plenty of room to provide ample car parks around there. I did go through it with a fine-tooth comb, so I'm operating on 2 hours sleep today. And from what I understand from the scheme, you must allow for 1 car park per dwelling. Now, they argue that there's only 2 dwellings. The recommendation report doesn't, but the DA does. The DA says there are 2 dwellings, and the reason why they argue that is so that they meet the standard for dwelling density. And so they claim, the complex of 13 apartments is visitor accommodation only, not dwellings. Therefore, they can spread the dwellings over that whole site area, and they're within the, they satisfy the performance criteria in that way. But to say that then, my argument was, well, absolutely, they're entitled to 2 car spots, but then for visitor accommodation, my understanding is council is at the discretion of that, like for how many they allow. I can't remember which councillor it was I spoke to, but someone said, recently there's been a few examples or an example of a visitor accommodation complex approved with no car park. That's in line with the city's regional objectives to encourage bicycle riding, just foot traffic, and given the proximity of Battery Point, the walkability of it, that seems pretty fair enough to me. So I was looking for reasons to say, maybe we could approve some sort of development, not at the scale it's at the moment, as long as there's no car park underneath. And I think there's ample space then to provide, 16 or 20 car parks on site, on ground level, that would meet the requirements of visitor accommodation and the 2 dwellings. I mean, it's also interesting to note they don't provide any bicycle parks either for the retail and cafe component, which they are required to do. So that's another discretion they're asking for. And in fact, mind the pun, but they're taking council for a ride. I think I put in the email when they say, we'll construct a bicycle rack as long as the council gives us some land to put it on. They don't want to put it on their land. It's unbelievable, some of the requests they're asking the council to do. Even the stormwater, the issue, it says in the recommendation report, South Street is at complete capacity for stormwater. And then the council report just says, so we would prefer you not to direct stormwater down South Street, we'd prefer you to use it on Hampton Road. I'm like, why is it so weak? Why don't they just say you are not to put it down South Street? If it's at absolute capacity, it has to be used on the Hampton Road, the Hampton Road stormwater, whatever it is. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. I feel like it's been very rushed, and it's just such a big development with huge impacts across, economics, health, heritage, cultural, so many significant risks across a vast, diverse issues. For it to be pushed through at the end of the year before Christmas is very unfair, very unreasonable.
Just please, for the sake of time, when the question is asked, if you just answer the question because you've already spoken, if you address the question, it'd be better.
I know, I'm sorry, Mark. I've had 2 hours sleep and I've got so much in my head.
Got the next question. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned the environment. Sorry, I got here late. I'll just tell that. But you mentioned the environmental impact it may have if there's excavation works.
Yes.
Then you made the point that you're happy for a development to happen on the site, but not as big or something like that, and bulky and high and all that. But there will be still excavation works if they have to dig into for foundations. So any environmental impact will be still there in some form or another.
No. So what I'm saying is not to excavate at all.
Right?
Yeah. Like I'm just saying, if
Okay.
they had the building on the land and just had the car parks wrapping around it, no excavation at all. Like I'm not. Yeah.
They would have to excavate to put foundations in.
Right. Okay. I'm not a builder. I don't know
Okay.
these things. Yeah.
Irrespective of
Yeah.
how high
But
the building is.
doing that for foundations would be
Excuse
very
me,
different. for-
ask the question, answer the question.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
have the debate and discussion later.
I just want to clarify that
Yeah, so it's
the
okay. We'll
person
take that later.
understands
Yeah.
that any form of building on the site would require excavation works.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
I didn't realise that maybe it's to improve the building.
Any other questions?
Just very quickly, can you remind me of the amount of square metres of fill that needs to be excavated? I'll ask the applicant.
Any other question? No? Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Anita,
Mike.
for your presentation. Now, the next representative we have is Neil Cranston, Battery Point Community Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that Alita has done and the significant analytical work that she's done. And I have to admit I am nowhere near at that level of detail. And I'll be brief. The Association essentially has nothing substantive to add to our written submission. However, it is keen to emphasise that its concerns essentially focus on the size and design of the proposed development, which is considered completely inappropriate for the location in the heart of historic Battery Point. Additionally, there is considerable concern across the community, as Alita has alluded to, regarding the impact on local businesses, residents, and importantly, tourist numbers during the build process. The development and related concerns were major topics of conversations at our recent community Christmas party. The Association is keen to emphasise that it is not opposed to a smaller scale and more considered development on the Prince of Wales site, one that takes account of the historic nature of the precinct and that adds value to the community, not takes away from it. We believe such a development would have broad community support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Great, appreciate it. Now, any questions from the elected members? Lord Mayor.
I think there was some concern or confusion around the two versions of the application. So I think, can you just remind me of, so there was an initial project that was in about February, was it?
Yes, the original one, as I understand it, there were well over 100 submissions from that. Yes, I think it was around there. And this later one is around about 50, but there was some confusion, as I understand from talking to people, who thought their submission on the first proposal counted for the second one, and hence they didn't put in a second one. And I suspect that's the decline in numbers.
And so as a representative who put in your first representation, did you receive an email after the withdrawal of the first application to say this application's been withdrawn, or any sort of closure of the fact that you've made a representation? I'm just looking in the direction of the microphone.
Yeah. I did receive acknowledgement. I understand a lot of people didn't, but I don't believe there was any follow-up closure.
Oh no, I meant more once, not an acknowledgement of receiving your representation, but once the project didn't proceed and was withdrawn, did you get a notice saying you put in a representation?
Yeah, I don't recall that.
No. And so did you receive a notification later saying you put in a representation about this, there's now a new application for something you're interested in? Did you get a notification like that?
And I don't recall, and I'm starting to sound like a politician, so but I don't recall.
Right, okay. And so how...
But because we live and walk that area all the time, we know every DA that goes up.
So in that sense, you saw a second round of signage go up, and that's how you found out?
Yes, yes, yep. And word of mouth spread very quickly.
Any other questions? Anyone else? No. Thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate it. Now, the third representative we have is David Clark. Thanks, David.
May I be clear, Chair, that the bell is at 1 minute to go?
4.5 minutes.
4.5 minutes.
And then you have 30 seconds from there.
Thank you.
Your time starts now.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. There are 4 main reasons to reject any proposal in a heritage area. They are: 1, harm to significance, that it reduces or degrades the area's cultural or heritage significance. 2, the aesthetic or design incompatibility. It clashes with the existing architectural style, scale or materials. 3rd, impact on setting. And 4th, non-compliance with the planning policies designed to protect the heritage area. I'll deal with 1 and 2 together, and they are the aesthetics and the harm to significance. The problem with this proposal is well outlined in the council's recommendation. Go to page 124, 6.11.4a, b and c, which I will address. The building design must enhance the streetscape by satisfying all of the following. I'll just deal with 3. Provide the main access to the building in a way that addresses the street. Provide windows in the front facade in a way that enhances the streetscape. Treats large areas of blank wall and the front facade facing other public boundaries with architectural details, etc. These are excellent criteria that have not been followed in this DA. And the criteria are excellent, and the council is to be congratulated because they conform to the criteria laid out by Nikos Salingaros, who is at the forefront of neuropsychology in the appreciation of architecture. By and large, it is this, that the eye must be led gently through the architectural landscape. If it's too bland, if it's not complex enough, if it is confronting, then it fails, and it will always fail. It is why this building is so revered, and the one on the corner of Collins and Murray is so despised. It will always be thus, because there is no hierarchical complexity in that building and not enough in the proposal. Let us just address, say, the windows. Now, it must provide windows in the front facade in a way that enhances the streetscape. And yet the response to that is the extent of fenestration is considered appropriate to the area, as vast amounts of glazing would undermine the heritage characteristics of the site. This is wrong. And you can see it's wrong by walking along Hampton Road. There are huge expanses of shop front glass. Why do they succeed? Why do they not offend your eye? Why are they a comfortable approach to the significance of the area? Because they have clever fenestration. This design does not have clever fenestration. Its fenestration is plain and awkward and confronting. Now let me get to the next one, the impact on setting. Alita has already mentioned the impact on the view from Arthur Circus to Kunyani, one of the most important views in Hobart. This will impact on it severely. And let me go to the 4th, non-compliance with planning policies. This proposal doesn't comply with site coverage, noise, height, setbacks, design, passive surveillance, landscaping, historic heritage code, and the historic heritage code in 6.26, where there are no acceptable solutions to council policies under A2, A4, A7 and A8. There are over 10 non-compliance issues with this proposal. The most important one is that, according to the council's report itself, compliance with a rigorous construction management plan will limit any adverse impacts. It is an acknowledgement that there will be adverse impacts. And thank you for your time. It fails on 4 criteria. It should be rejected. Thank you.
Any questions? questions from the elected members? Lord Mayor.
Yeah, just you took us to page 124 and you talked about 6.11.4
Yes.
and you said that the building design must enhance the streetscape by satisfying all, as you emphasised, of the following criteria. And then there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 criteria, and I do notice that there's just one summary paragraph that addresses the 8 criteria. But specifically, apart from the glazing, is the glazing the only one that you say that the design doesn't meet of those 8 performance criteria?
No, look at, for example, A. What happens when your eye is drawn to a building and you're trying to find the front door?
Let's provide the main access to the building in a way that addresses the street
That is correct.
or other public space boundary.
Yeah. And it means that your eye should be able to work out, in other words, that the design gives you enough information such that your neurophysiology is attracted to the doorway. Ingress and egress is facilitated by the design. This one has, as it were, blank doorways, and that is why it doesn't satisfy the usual standards of neurophysiology. Take the glazing again.
That's B, is it?
That's B.
Yeah.
If I might just expand on that, a new development in Rozelle in Sydney has huge areas of glass behind an arched facade, vastly over the 40% required by this development, and yet it works because it has clever fenestration. It needs to work because the rest of the development is absolutely atrocious, but that part particularly works. It can be done, but the architect and the developers don't seem to know what they're after, and therefore it isn't done.
So, but all the other than those A and B, would you agree that C, D, E, F, G, H have all been?
I haven't addressed those because I didn't have time.
Yeah. And there's no, it doesn't look as though there's advice in the report about any of those. So. Okay, that was my only question.
Any other questions? Anyone else? No. Okay, David, thank you for your presentation.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. All right, the next representative is Matthew Wolf. Thank you, Matthew.
Chair, councillors, Lord Mayor, thank you firstly for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. The development application represents a fundamental departure from the intent, the objectives and protective purpose of both the planning scheme and the Heritage Code. By its scale, height, massing and design, it completely disregards the controls designed to protect one of Australia's most carefully preserved heritage precincts. Battery Point is not simply an older neighbourhood. Its values lie in its intactness, the cumulative effect of modest buildings, consistent roof lines, narrow streets, historic views that have been carefully protected and preserved over generations. The planning scheme, it's explicit. Development in this precinct must be recessive, subordinate and respectful. This proposal is none of those things. At 55 Hampton Road, the scale, height and design place it in direct conflict with the scheme, exceeding the height limit by 2.7 metres. It's not a technicality, it's a material breach. The building's bulk and mass overwhelm the surrounding heritage cottages. It dominates the streetscape and imposes a contemporary form that is neither sympathetic nor is it respectful. I'm very aware that the planning scheme operates through performance criteria and that discretion may be exercised where outcomes genuinely satisfy those criteria. However, despite repeated claims by the applicants, this application does not meet them. Of the 60 applicable standards, the applicant claims compliance with only 27. That's not even half. Of those 27, many of them are questionable. and some rely on untested and potentially false assumptions. Given the significance of height and scale, Council, please scrutinise all claims of compliance very carefully, particularly those relating to heritage compatibility, streetscape protection, overshadowing and amenity. The proposal regarding car parking is also quite problematic. All 37 car spaces are reserved exclusively for residents of the short stay visitors, and none for the workers or employees or the cafe patrons. Or the retail space. This ignores the planning scheme, the parking and access code, and the likely impacts on already constrained on-street parking. To avoid this, the development should be limited to 2 stories, and the cafe should not be approved, given the oversupply already along Hampton Road and Battery Point, and the existing risk of the local businesses who are struggling. The Heritage Code does not require imitation of historical architecture, but it is unequivocal. New development must not dominate, overwhelm, or diminish heritage significance. This proposal fails that test. Approving discretion here would undermine the purpose of the code and sets a damaging precedent. It's also worth noting that the recommendation report claims that this proposed development won't cause stress for on-street parking, based on what I hope is simply an oversight. The recommendation report claims that patrons for the new cafe and the retail space will be the equivalent of the current Prince of Wales Hotel. However, the proposal removes the entire car park that is currently there for the types of visitors to the Prince of Wales Hotel. The proposed car park, as I mentioned before, is exclusive for short stay accommodation. Therefore, this proposal will cause significant stress to on-street parking. I'd like to touch on now on the impact on Arthur's Circus, which cannot be understated. This is one of Tasmania's most iconic heritage settings. The existing low-rise built form and views toward the mountain are integral in its significance. The intrusion of a 3rd story would fundamentally alter the experience of this place. Councillors, this is a clear test. How much do we, as a community, genuinely care about heritage values? The credibility of the supporting documentation is also deeply concerning. The Heritage Impact Assessment states that the Prince of Wales Hotel has, and I quote, no historical or cultural significance. There has been a pub on this site since 1843. And yet in the applicant's own website, it states, since 1843, the Prince of Wales Hotel has been a favourite watering hole for Hobart locals and visiting travellers alike. These statements cannot both be true. This directly undermines the credibility of the heritage assessment and raises serious questions about the merits of the application. I just want to tell you a short story. 12 months ago, my family applied for a small in-keeping skylight at our home at 41 South Street. Council refused it due to the streetscape impact. While it would have improved the well-being of our children, we accepted the decision because we respect the planning scheme and the Heritage Code. Against that backdrop for this application, to then support a large 2-storey townhouse with genuinely significant streetscape impacts must be an oversight, as it's entirely incomprehensible. Just quickly, in the interest of time, I also want to mention the underground car park and the significant structural and financial risks. Excavation on shallow footings, rubble stone, line mortar, unreinforced masonry, with shallow geotechnical sampling and no vibration assessment is entirely inadequate. There's risk of cracking, subsidence, foundational fracture and irreversible damage extending well beyond the site boundary to the surrounding historical properties of Battery Point.
Matthew, your time is up. Thank you. Lord Mayor.
Can I ask you to outline some of your concerns with the car park?
Absolutely, Lord Mayor. The excavation, as I mentioned before, shallow footing, lime mortar, a lot of the buildings are at risk of foundational fracture and damage. So a lot of the houses are not, my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert in the area, however, my understanding is a lot of the buildings, such as the one that we live in, they're almost 170, 180 years old. They have not been, when they were not built with deep excavation. They were built on quite shallow footings. There's not much beneath them, frankly. They're on convict brick. There's lime mortar. They're at significant risk of fractional and foundational damage. Drilling 8 metres below or plus to do the excavation work is a significant risk to the foundational structure of all of the heritage buildings in the precinct. I'd like to extend to that the financial risk. my understanding of what I've read in the DA is that the applicants would be responsible for any repair of damage caused to neighbouring properties as a result of the excavation and the building works. My concern is that the company that proposes the development is a private company with limited liability for its shareholders. What that means is, if things were to go pear-shaped and there was financial liability required to be paid, there is potential a limitation there in terms of there would be no recourse for those who have been impacted by this to seek that financial recourse and remediation. So where does that lie? Who should then bear that cost? Ultimately, that puts the risk on the community, on the residents, on the council. It doesn't put it on the developers.
Matthew, before I ask Councillor Kelly to ask the question, just a comment I want to make. Would you agree that excavation is not an issue for planning for us to deal with? It is not a planning issue.
Well, perhaps technically. In saying that, though, it needs to be considered. We're talking about a planning application. That's a significant part of it. The damages are astronomical potentially, and if it's not considered as part of this process, it's considered at a later stage during the building stage. It's too late. It's far too late.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly has just withdrawn, or I have asked the question maybe he was going to ask. Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Matthew, for your presentation. The final representative is Erin Kesh.
Do I need to move it down or will it pick me up okay? It should be all right. Beautiful, okay.
For recording purposes.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. You have a copy of my representation, but I'd like to talk about a couple of key things. Firstly, Battery Point is a highly valued and popular heritage precinct. In particular, Hampton Road, where the proposal is situated, is one of the main tourist areas of Hobart, known for the iconic heritage buildings. It also happens to be very near and dear to me because I walk down it on the way to work most days of the week. And it is often the best part of my day. The Hobart City Council has a responsibility to manage heritage values of the precinct. The proposal as it currently stands, whilst is a slight improvement on the previous planning submission, does not uphold or enhance the heritage values of the Battery Point precinct. I would urge elected members to require the developer to undertake a heritage assessment of the entire streetscape and look at the impact of the proposal on the heritage streetscape as a whole. It needs to be viewed in the context of surrounding buildings, not just as an individual proposal. Council's own Battery Point conservation policy details contributory elements that comprise the Battery Point heritage landscape. Whilst I appreciate the efforts have been taken with the varied roofscape, I would argue there are a number of unacceptable non-contributory elements in the design, with the bulk and siting of the South Street side of the building particularly concerning. The material and finish of the facade are also not sympathetic to the adjacent heritage listed buildings. In addition, the linear form of the boxy balconies that directly abut the street and accompanying dormers on the rooftop are in no way, shape or form contributing to heritage elements of Hampton Road. In fact, it is really more reminiscent of her housing development in a new build urban sprawl suburb, which is a bit ridiculous given it's in Battery Point. I'm actually very disappointed that the architect did not come up with something a bit more imaginative to mediate the distinctive build form of the proposed new build. In terms of building heights, this proposal requires greater sensitivity in transition of building heights to the adjacent state-listed heritage residences. The building height standard of urban mixed-use zones is 10 metres maximum, but here the maximum height proposed is 11.21 metres, which is not in keeping with the zoning of the area, let alone the heritage values. Currently, the proposed building height dominates over adjacent buildings, such as De Angelo's at 47 Hampton Road, and other state-listed heritage buildings immediately opposite the site. In terms of Arthur's Circus, which other people have covered today, point 5 of the Council's conservation policy for Battery Point the conservation policy in general states that new buildings should be compatible and visually subservient when viewed from any road or public open space. Point 16 states infill development should respond to and not obscure the topography of the area. Not only a prime tourist destination, Arthur's Circus is also the only such circus of its kind in Australia. So it's a unique heritage landscape that really does deserve respect. It's one of the oldest subdivisions in Australia, and the cottages have been carefully preserved and attract thousands of visitors every year. Now, due to the unacceptable height of the proposed building on the South Street side of the block, this mass will dominate the vista from both road and public open space of this iconic visited location. It would have been really generous of the application to include more artists' imagining of the vistas from Arthur's Circus, because the current image downplays the sightline impacts of the proposed building. Hobart City Council must impose a height restriction on the building on the South Street side of the block to ensure that there's greater sensitivity in transition of building heights in keeping with the adjacent building heights. The contemporary reinterpretation is really out of keeping with the heritage values of Hampton Road. It is really hard, and I did look, to find a building on this street that is not state heritage listed. And it is disappointing that an architect would use such little imagination in cramming in multiple visitor accommodation with no sympathy or regard for the heritage landscape that is one of the state's main tourist draws. As a young person, I'm really lucky to live in Battery Point, and part of that is getting to experience the heritage, which this proposed design will unfortunately decimate. There is really no evidence that more visitor accommodation is required in the area, and any decision that is made now is unfortunately irreversible. As elected representatives, you need to look beyond the greed of one developer and instead sit with the weight of approving a blight on an important heritage precinct that not only the state economy depends on, but the local community gets to enjoy. Thank you. Sorry, questions. Sorry. Thought I'd get to go. Thank you.
You can do those things like that, no problem. Or any questions? Councillor Luberger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just try and ask the question so the microphone can hear me. You mentioned Angelo's. I did ask a question earlier at the start of the representations about businesses around the site. D'Angelo's didn't come up. You're possibly not the right person to ask this question, but are you aware of what the opinion is of the restaurateur at D'Angelo's?
No, I'm unfortunately not. Similar to other people with this application, there was very limited time. I really would have loved to have been able to engage with the community association through that and to get a kind of understanding of how other people feel. But certainly, yeah, from a lay person's perspective, it's not really in visual keeping with a lot of the state heritage listed buildings on the street, which would include D'Angelo's.
Thank you. Just supplementary, if I might share, I suspect some of the other speakers might be able to answer that question. Are we able to ask whether any of the previous speakers could answer that question?
Maybe you can bring it out in the discussion, and if someone wants to clarify it then.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, any other questions from the elected members? No? Thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now we have the applicants with us. We have Michael Cooper and also Patrick Carroll. Now, usually we give them 5 minutes, but considering that we have given the others time, I would use my discretion to say you have 5 minutes each. So please come over. Michael and Patrick. So you can divide it the way you want it. We wish to address some of the issues that have been raised.
We're sharing the 5 minutes, or we're doing 5 minutes? Okay, thanks.
So, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair, elected members and staff. My name is Patrick Carroll, Senior Planner at ERA Advisory, and we are the applicants for the proposal you are considering and determining this afternoon for 55 Hampton Road and 43 South Street, Battery Point. With me is Michael Cooper of MRRC, one of the owners of the site. Thank you for the time you've given to consider this application. Thank you also to the officers for the work involved in preparing the assessment before you today. The proposal is for a mixed-use development in the heart of Battery Point, including residential, a cafe, retail and visitor accommodation uses. The site is currently occupied by the Prince of Wales Hotel and a cottage at South Street, which is an approved visitor accommodation use. The proposal has been carefully considered to respond to the applicable standards of the planning scheme. The proposal respects and retains the significant heritage values of the area, and it addresses the requirements of the planning scheme. In short, the design has been prepared with site's context in Battery Point front of mind. This outcome is a design that is a product of an iterative process over several years. This is the third application for a redevelopment of the site. Over nearly a decade, the owners have openly engaged with their project team, with council, residents, representatives of the previous application, and with the council's Urban Design Advisory Panel.
Please let the gentleman speak.
The advice and opinions have been listened to, and the design has been modified accordingly. The biggest change is the retention of the South Street cottage, which was proposed to be demolished as part of the previous application. The feedback received was clear that the residents of Battery Point wished for the cottage to be retained. We've listened to that, and the cottage now forms a key part of the proposal. That feedback loop of consultation, revision and retesting has undoubtedly shaped the proposal in front of you. The design is much better resolved and more responsive than where we began. Turning to the proposal itself, the application is supported by detailed technical studies, including heritage, site contamination, traffic impact, noise assessment, and civil infrastructure modelling. Council's officers have assessed the proposal and are supportive. Where discretions apply, we have demonstrated that the relevant performance criteria are satisfied. Council's assessment concurs, and the officer's report recommends approval. We have reviewed the recommended conditions of approval, and we are supportive of the conditions as they are drafted. Site contamination was a key consideration in preparing the application. An environmental site assessment has been prepared in accordance with the potentially contaminated land code and concludes that the proposed use and the extent of excavation are suitable without any adverse impacts on human health or the environment. We are also committed to preparing a construction management plan and a soil and water management plan for the project, with this detail to be provided prior to construction. In relation to construction, we recognise that some community members remain concerned about construction impacts, particularly in relation to the construction of the underground car park. The car park is a core component of the proposal, providing much needed off-street parking for occupants. Failure to provide on-site parking will push cars, motorcycles and bikes onto the road. The car park also incorporates storage and bins for the units and commercial tenancies. While there will be undoubtedly disruptions during construction, as there are with any development, these are short-term impacts and the long-term outcome will ultimately benefit the Battery Point community. However, the concerns raised by representatives are real, and our client is committed to managing those impacts appropriately. As set out in our original submission, or page 313 of the supporting information package, we are committed to providing the following: a clear communication plan with advance notice to nearby residents and businesses, estimated start and finish dates and transparent construction timing, identification of a site superintendent who can be readily contacted by council, measures to control sediment transfer and protect adjacent public areas, and appropriate site fencing for public safety. We have also committed to prepare a construction environmental management plan, construction and demolition methodology, identification of potential environmental impacts, including dust, noise, odours and air quality, and the measures we will implement to avoid or mitigate those risks. There is a clear pathway for approval under the Act and the provisions of the planning scheme, and Council's officers are in agreement. We respectfully seek your support this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, any questions from the elected members? Lord Mayor.
What is the construction period, you think?
That's not a planning matter.
I'm just interested.
I don't know.
Well, we've proposed that it's between 18 months to 2 years.
And you mentioned about appropriate fencing around the site.
There's, common construction fencing that you see to prevent. Yeah, mesh fencing generally is.
How about solid hoardings?
Yeah, we could do that. That wouldn't be a problem at all. I mean, to minimise any flow going into the streets or anything like that, absolutely, that's fine.
Solid boarding, sort of kind of art, some sort
Yeah,
of art.
some sort of, yeah. Well, obviously the montage of what's potentially going to be built there as well, it's nice to do, but I wouldn't put mesh fencing there, it'd look quite ugly. No, I'm with you there 100%. Yeah, it'd be an eyesore.
I'm just interested in, I'm not sure, maybe it's for yourself as the applicant. Did you want to do your
I'll do my
piece
thing and
first?
you can ask me lots of questions.
So is there any other question you want to ask, or we'll have you present as well, so, and then we'll ask questions, is that okay?
All the questions
All right,
at the end.
okay, so we'll have the questions after you finish, thank you.
Okay, with me?
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairman, Alderman and Lord Mayor, for the opportunity to present to you guys. What I thought I'd do is I've got some large images here, just makes it easier looking at computers. 1,000 words, but if you just hand them round, you'll see there's 2 copies of each. There's before and after. So if you just want to share those as we discuss what we're proposing to do. So I thought I want to do is just talk about a bit of the journey, where the 4 partners got to this stage and when we started. 4 of us decided to buy a pub. That sounds like a great idea, but anyway, we've got to this stage 20 years later. The Prince of Wales itself has been operating as a pub for a long, long time, as we all understand. The version of the pub today is the second iteration. The first one was pulled down some many, many years ago, and the new one was built. The new one's meant to look like a boat, but I think it was a poorly designed boat built by the Cascade Brewery. As everyone said, the paper says, everyone knows, and I think everyone in this room agrees, it is an eyesore, the current building. It's absolutely terrible. We thought many, many years ago, when we bought this property, we'll see how we go with it, and one day we'll try and make it a better building. Since 2018, we've found it very difficult to be sustainable as a pub. Everyone knows that hospitality has been doing it really tough, and due to the consumption of, or the lack of consumption of alcohol, the pub culture's gone. So we really do find it really hard to sustain the pub as currently as it is. So something needs to be done. So we've been on this journey now for 7 years to do a redevelopment. This is actually our 3rd DA. The first one we pulled many, many years ago, probably 3 years ago. The second one was only presented in February, as you know. We got feedback from the community that there was really great concerns regarding South Street. So we went back to drawing board, and obviously some setbacks as well, plus some bulk. So we reduced the bulk on the northern side, and we maintained South Street as it is, because South Street's over 100 years old, and we've maintained the trees. There's 3 beautiful pine trees there that I'd hate to think how old they are, but they're maintaining as well, so we're not changing any of that at all. This has included our 5th architectural company that's been involved in this project. So we have tested as many as we can, and we believe the design that we've got to today is in fitting with the landscape and the streetscape. Considering where we started many, many years ago, we're quite proud of where we've got to. You know, we've invested over $500,000 on this current abbreviation of the design. We believe the proposal with the 13 apartments and 2 townhouses, a small cafe and a retail space is a better fit for the hotel, with a liquor licence currently to 1 a.m, large food and beverage trucks delivering goods daily, along with large amounts of traffic coming and going through the car park. So if we talk about traffic and impacts on the community, it's going to be reduced dramatically. There'll be no bands going to 1 o'clock in the morning. There'll be no exhaust fans coming out of a kitchen. We've got a commercial kitchen there. We've got grease traps. It is a working pub, as we know, and they're very, very noisy. So the impacts on the community are going to be reduced dramatically in noise, which I think has been a big concern as well. We listened to the community, as we said. We pulled the first second DA, which was submitted in February. We have had a community consultation. When we pulled the DA, we went back and obviously no longer removing South Street and removed one of the townhouses as well, and also removed the bulk, as I mentioned. We did a presentation in the Battery Point Progress Committee Hall, where we had about 50 people turn up. We answered lots of questions there, as many questions as we could answer. We've also had 2 other meetings with individual members of the community, talking to the questions that they had. You know, the 4 of us, we've got other properties in Battery Point. 2 of us live in Battery Point. We work in Battery Point. One of our partners has been there since 1977. So, you know, we really appreciate the sensitivity of Battery Point. We don't want to build something that's an eyesore. We don't want to build something that's going to upset the community. We're here to work with the community. We're going to live here the rest of our lives. We're not developers come in from overseas and going to just pump and dump and leave the place. We're here forever. So we want to make sure that this works for everyone. The final design we've got to, and there's been lots of versions I could show you. We talk about glazing. We had a glass box design once by one architect, and that just wasn't going to fit the space. So we have worked really, really hard to try and make this fit in the streetscape. And you see the dormers and stuff, which match the other dormers down the road. So we've done the best we can. There's a big gap between the building. It's hard to see in Hampton Road. It's about 3.5 metre wide entrance, which cuts the building in half, which is full of, you'll see in your day, but it's full of vegetation. The trees go right down through the middle. So the building is actually broken in half quite materially. All the other trees that are currently on the street today stay. We're not removing any of those, bar one in the corner near D'Angelo's. Just on D'Angelo's, we've got D'Angelo's support. It's probably why he's not here, because he's very supportive of it. He's been our neighbour for 20 odd years, and he said as long as everything goes well, we're happy to support it. So he'd be here if he wasn't typey. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's Michael and Patrick. For your presentation. Now, any questions?
Thank you for this. Just a couple of questions. So it's 2 townhouse dwellings and 13.
That's correct.
And you're expecting 11 of the 13 to be visitor accommodation?
No, I don't think it's that. 13 to be optional, residential or visitor, so both.
The proposal is for visitor.
So 13 visitor accommodation. So
But from my understanding is, if you a successful visitor accommodation and you convert to residential, you can never go back. So that's the option that whoever purchased the land, the apartments, or we keep them. That's how we understand that is the rules.
So the ownership will remain?
No, well, we're not really sure the breakup. We might split it between all of us, or we might end up selling them individually as a company. But they may well develop and split up between the 4 owners, and everyone gets, it's not going to be even. Someone's going to get one short, but we haven't got that far, to be honest.
Now, when you were here last time, the big concern for me was the excavation and the car park. And we sort of talked, I said, why have you got so many car parks? Why don't you halve it? And, the feedback I had that night and from other conversations is, we don't want that many car parks, and they're expensive. I mean, have you sort of worked out how much the excavation part of the project would be? It must be like millions.
Well, undoubtedly.
Won't be cheap.
Yeah. To Michael's point about the future use, so the application, yes, is for visitor accommodation. Just take you through to the commentary in council agenda at paragraph 6.16. 6.16.2. So, yes, we've proposed 37 car parks as part of this application. Council's development engineer has identified that the planning scheme requirement is actually 59. So we've got a shortfall of 22 spaces in what's proposed. Now, the reason why we've included 37 car parking spaces is that in the future, if any do go to residential, there is the provision there for adequate car parking for those apartments.
If council has discretion on which these are performance criteria, I think, like the acceptable solution is...
Yes, so the acceptable solution requires 59 car parking spaces. They've exercised their discretion and support the proposal for 37.
I know, but there's plenty of exercise of discretion through this whole report. So, I mean, couldn't council exercise its discretion and say, given proximity, given visitor accommodation, it's a very walkable area, given the proximity to the city, that there is no need for car parking at all?
I respectfully disagree, and the reason so is that...
Based on what?
If the car park was removed from the proposal, that would effectively take out the option for residential at any point in the future.
Based on what?
Very hard to construct an underground car park and put those 59 car parking spaces as have been identified as required under the planning scheme.
But if the discretion is there for us to say that parking is not required, given all of the other features of the suburb, you know, then it would still work as a development. I mean, there's lots of developments that don't have car parks underground, isn't it?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Yeah, but that's probably more a question for your officers.
But as far as you're concerned, if there was no requirement for car parking, would the development work?
I'd say no. But we've been in this place for 20 years and we know how tight parking is in Battery Point. If you're going to put in this development here and you've got 15 so-called apartments, if you call the townhouses as well, where those minimum 15 to 20 cars are going to park, there's just no room in the streets because people are going to come, they're going to visit the venue, the retail, they're going to visit the cafe, they might come and visit someone staying there, but it's also a long way to carry your groceries if you've got to carry them from Sandy Bay. I mean, people are not going to carry them on a scooter. So I think the car parking is pretty critical to this because there's just no car parking in Battery Point, and that's why we decided to build a car park. It'll be serious expense, but that's why we're putting it under the ground so it disappears from everyone. One thing to note on this proposal is the building currently sits on its foundations, and I think Marty mentioned that before. The foundations of this current hotel is big enough to support a tower, Empress Tower. It was originally built to support a tower, which is quite ironic. You're welcome to come and have a look. You go down 4 metres, and the foundations are brick and solid. So that is 50% of the building's already excavated. So we only need to excavate around that bit. Talking to the geoscientist, the rock around which they've drilled on is already loose when they originally dug the foundations. So there's a lot of loose gravel there already. There's some hard rock in a couple of the corners, but it's nowhere near what everyone's proposing. You saw the contamination? The contaminations are from the old pub when they knocked down, they had lead paint on it. So, you know, all sort of old buildings are going to have a bit of lead in and contamination, and we have to decontaminate the site, all the rules, conditions, we know that. But the actual, as far as the excavation, we reckon only take about 8 weeks to do the excavation because half it's already excavated underneath the foundations of the building. So that sort of may address some concerns about how long that would take and the process in doing it. So
based on that excavation time frame, how many square metres?
Roughly about 3,000 cubic centimetres.
3,000.
Yeah.
And have you tested down to?
I've been down to 6 metres. Core samples. I don't think they went as far as 8, but we can double check in the report. It'll probably be in the report, but from what I understand it was. But they did a lot of core samples. In the report, you'll see where the dots are done all around the place. So. 6 metres. Yeah, 6 metres went down.
Going down to more like 15 car parks and doing half the amount.
It probably wouldn't stack up. I mean, it's quite attractive to have an apartment with 2 car spots, you know, commercially as well. So we've got to make sure that this stacks up financially, and if it doesn't stack up, there's no point doing it. I mean, the main thing with us, starting from going back to the start, the building is just not sustainable where it is. It's an eyesore. I don't know what we're going to do with it. If we don't do this proposal, I don't know what's next, because it can't operate like it is. So do we board it up and just let the weeds grow around it? That's the last thing we want to do. Or send it for social housing or something. Like, it's just such a great opportunity to do it well, and we believe we've had every expert known to man in Hobart look at this. UDAP's looked at it. We've had 5 architect companies have a go at it. So we believe we've got pretty close to where it needs to be, considering the streetscape it fits in. We've done our best, and maintaining a very open space through the middle, lots of greenery still. It's got to be attractive. We really get that. As I said, many of us spend all our time in Battery Point.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. You mentioned social housing there, and I had heard that this site was on Housing Tasmania's radar if this falls over. Have you had any contact from Housing Department?
No, not as yet, no.
Yep.
But that could be the next option, I suppose.
Yep.
Any other questions? Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. This one question's probably to you, Michael. Just regarding, I'm quite interested in D'Angelo's because it is so close.
Yes,
It's been there forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a quite close attachment to it. Has there been any concerns raised from the building owner or the restaurant there just about the car, the blasting of the car park? Because I feel like they...
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we have a very good relationship with Ange, and we don't want to put jelly on the car park. We wouldn't be doing that. So how they break the rock up or whether they need to, because some is loose and some is soft, I really can't say at this point, but it's 100% our responsibility to make good if there's any issues. We've been in this, you know, all of us have been in Tasmania for our lives, 55 years. We're not walking away from this, so we're not going to get up and run away because we crack someone's building. But I've done other developments in Battery Point, and we went around and took all the photos of everybody's house in the precinct around us, and we went back when the job was finished and we took the photos and there were no cracks, and we blasted rock as well, not blast, but rock breakers, so didn't use jelly night, but so it is possible to do things, you know, in the right calmly way. So as I said, it's not our intention at all to do any damage, but D'Angelo's, he's more than happy with the acceptance of it. He actually looks...
Point of order, please, Chair.
Can you not interject, please? Let Michael and Patrick have this.
You know, he sees this as a great opportunity because there's going to be a lot more people living right next to him, so there's a lot of pizzas going out the door, and in long term it's beneficial. So there's no doubt there'll be some pain during construction. We can't help that. It'd be great if we could just drop the thing in there one day and it's all done, but there will definitely be some pain. There's no doubt about that, and we can only work our best. But as you said, to cover up the site as much as we could, exactly what we would do.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Just a follow-up question. I guess I just was interested whether there had been any concerns raised from that site by the...
Yeah. No, we've spoken to Ange quite a few times. He's come and had a couple of meetings with him already, or probably over the journey, probably 5 or 6 meetings. Because, you know, we've gone to him before with previous DAs that we were looking to do and discussed it with him. So
he hasn't objected before.
No, he didn't put a representation, I believe, and he's not here now. So
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Lord Mayor, and then I'll come to the Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your comments, much appreciated. I was just wondering, there clearly seems to be some disagreement in D'Angelo's opinions from yourselves in contrast to what we've just heard. Do you have any comments on that at all?
No, well, all the conversations we've had, and there's 4 of us, have all been quite positive with Ange. So, and he came to us, and he came to me, and he said, "Listen, the community have got some concerns." He rang me up the other day. He was very excited about a recent announcement, and he said, "I just want to let you know that, you know, there's concerns regarding the car park," and we've heard that from all the community. There's no doubt about that, and we want to make sure that there's no issue with that. I mean, as I said, you know, it won't be cheap to do, but it'll definitely take every bit of car off. All the cars that need to go to this site will be underground. So it's going to be a benefit. Currently, we've got people visiting our hotel. When our car park's full, they park in the street. As we know, that you guys, what I understand is the council's going to take some parking out of Hampton Road. I think that's a bit of a plan. So there's, it may only be 4 or 5 spots, but 4 or 5 makes a big difference. So we've seen that already, and the parking right outside, diagonally outside our building, which is on the western side, that all stays. And that's sort of, you know, casual parking, you might as well call it, which is used for us and the bakery and everyone else in the precinct.
So the comments were, the comments that he spoke to you about were largely around just the car park, not the overall development itself. So he was voicing those concerns to you from the community, or was that his own personal opinion that he wasn't happy with it? The impression I got from him, he was coming to us because he knows us quite well, was he just saying the community is really, really concerned about the car park. And I said, well, we're going to do this presentation at the hall. He actually didn't come, and we'll try and answer all those questions or appease them. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's the best solution to get all the cars off the road. If we don't have a car park, commercially it won't stack up, but I don't know where you'd put all the cars. Yeah, so he was fine. He was fine. I suppose the issue was just that disagreement that just happened there. I'm just trying to understand it. So the disagreement was with him. It wasn't his opinion that the car park was an issue. It was something he was relaying.
Bit of a spokesman, yeah. He's just giving the words around, you know, people running around the streets and talking about it. So he was just relaying that back to me. So.
I'm going to go to Alderman Zuko first and then come to the Lord Mayor. Thanks.
And just
following on from the Deputy's questions, but before I go to the questions here, I just want to get some advice from the manager. Have we received a deputation from the D'Angelo's restaurant?
Look, our policy is to keep representatives anonymous. Yeah, I'd like to say that people have got the opportunity to put representation in and remain anonymous. So I can't see.
Point taken. There's no problem. Thank you very much. Because the deputies mentioned that the fact that there's people mentioning on both sides about D'Angelo's. Unless I can see from either party some written documentation from that particular establishment, I'm going to take no weight from either side. Okay.
Councillor Kitsos, and then I'll come to the Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the use of performance criteria for the passive surveillance on the stage, the other plainly obvious. I'm just curious about this one, why it wasn't able to be built into the design to actually meet that acceptable criteria.
I might hand you over to the planning expert, because he would have worked with the architects.
So this is in relation to clause 15.4.4. Yep. So the reason why it invokes discretion for that standard is in response to the heritage characteristics of the precinct and the non-residential uses proposed. And that's largely due to the glazing detail that's been proposed for those shop fronts.
Follow up to that, if I may. Was there any attempt to try to meet that solution?
It's an exercise of compromise, so dealing with the standard of the zone, which could be in other parts of the city or in other municipalities across the state. These are the interim scheme provisions, so they are broadly similar across the urban mixed zone that's here in Launceston, Burnie and so on, that you've got to balance those provisions against the heritage values of the site, and then we've decided to put the emphasis on the heritage values of the site, which has meant that a discretion has been invoked for this standard here.
Just on the glazing factor, if you look at the proposed plan, there's a lot more glazing that's currently there today. Currently today we've got one window straight across from the vets as such. There's going to be in the new one, there's a big one on the corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, a large open space of 3.5 metres. So if you look at, if you can see that bottom way there, see all the glazing all the way along, and a large glazing here, open space here, glazing there, glazing, there's a heap more glazing than what's there today. It's probably triple what's there today. So to sort of answer that question, we are improving the glazing if that's performance criteria, but maybe that's what the architect thought, without having mass glass that looks like a modern building. We're trying to really blend the streetscape to look into what the precinct is. Because we could do the whole thing glass way down, but that'd be horrendous. So that's why they did that. So, but you can see by the breakups there how much glaze there is, and the big tunnel through the middle, that's straight across from Oasis, I think, just straight through, which is basically breaks the whole thing in half. So that's quite big, that tunnel. It goes, I think, 3.5 into 4.5 metres in the middle, with trees all the way down that. So it's a big space. But at the end of the day, like, there's been a lot of community feedback. There's been a couple of articles in the paper this week, as you've all seen it. You go online and look at the feedback from the community. It's all positive. Like, I think we have any negative comments on the Mercury, might have 1 or 2, but majority were really positive about going ahead and doing something with this property. It's just an eyesore. Even the Mercury said it's an eyesore, and it is. So this is a great opportunity. You've got 4 developers here willing to take the risk, financial risk, on trying to fix this thing. And if we can't do this, I don't know who's going to do it, because probably no one will. And it'll be stuck there like it is for the rest of its days, and it's ugly as it is, and no, it'll be closed because it's not sustainable. That's pretty simple.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to ask the Lord Mayor to ask the question. And can you please, elected members, speak on the mic, because it's not picking up, I'm told.
So, what was my question? So I just need to just again clarify. So in terms of if you cut the car parks by half and therefore the excavation by half, even though that would cost you less for construction,
Probably not a massive, because we've got to dig the foundations down anyway. So we're going to be going down to the same depth to put the pylons to support the building. So really, that's the big issue. As Marty said, we can't build the building on top of a flat car park. It's going to have large foundations, and they'll go down 6 metres at least, because it's a 3-storey building, a lot of weight on it. So we're going to be digging it anyway. So naturally, that's what will happen. So whether it's got dirt around it or a car park sitting underneath it, it's the same principle.
Any other questions?
And just the construction management plan, that would be a transparent document to the community?
Yes, we haven't had an issue with that. We want to be transparent with everyone. We're not hiding anything here. As I said, we live and breathe in the street. People can see us every day, so we don't want to be walking down the street with someone trying to abuse us for doing the wrong thing.
Any other questions? Anyone else? No. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael and Patrick, for your presentation. Now, Councillor Kelly, you will, are there any questions to the staff? Okay, and then if someone wants to move the recommendation, we'll do that then. Okay, Councillor Kelly first.
Yeah, just so I've got it clear in my head, through you, Chair, to the relevant planning officer. Construction costs, is that whether it's costs $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million to dig a hole in the ground, is that part of a development application assessment that we should be considering today?
Through you, Chair, no, that's right.
Okay, thank you. That's the first one I had. So the hole in the ground, essentially whether it takes a week or a day or X period of time, we as a planning authority are not to consider that. So thank you for clarifying that. The cost, the cost, businesses in the other area, an impact on a new cafe against an old cafe, for instance, is that a consideration for us as a planning authority today to consider?
No, not in this area.
No, okay, that's the second one I wanted to get out of the way. All items relating to contaminated soil, dust, anything like that, is that something we today as a planning authority have to consider in our decision?
Through you, Chair. So the contaminated site aspect of it is to a degree. It obviously pulls up her discretion in the planning scheme. The relevant criteria requires an environmental site assessment, which has been submitted. This in this case, it's gone one step further. There's a containment management plan, so really addressing how you might deal with dust and odours and those kind of things, that higher level than you will probably normally have because of that kind of contaminated aspect. So, you know, things like wetting the soil down and all those kind of things. So that part of it. In terms of the construction management plan, look, that's something we always put on as a planning condition for developments of scale, managing traffic movements and those kind of things. So it is linked to the planning. That part of it's not assessed specifically, but the contaminated site part is.
And just two other quick questions. So someone mentioned, this is a financial risk. Is a financial risk for us today to consider?
No, it's not a planning consideration for this.
And the last one, we've mentioned competition, building plans and all that. That's nothing, I mean, of course, how a construction site looks and the time and all that, that's more of a building application issue than a development application. I'm correct in saying that?
Correct.
Okay. And my final question, duration of construction. Is there conditions put on whether this building is going to take a month, 6 months, a year or longer? Is that part of the decision-making process today?
No, that's governed under the Building Act.
Okay. Right. So thanks for clarifying those 6 points, which I think there's a big area of confusion here and a lot of discussion.
We will come to the discussion later.
Thank you.
Okay. The Lord Mayor, you have a question, and I'm told, Michael and Patrick, you can return to your seats, but if you want to sit there, that's fine, because no one else is coming.
Okay, fair enough. More comfortable.
Okay, if you're comfortable there, that's fine. Okay, the Lord Mayor.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So I'm just, can we get the fly through for the the council's streetscape fly-through, like we normally would?
The Model 3 use, the model, I don't think we have the model for this project, so usually that's reserved for the kind of ones that are over 3 stories, so yeah, there wasn't a model supplied for this.
This is one of our iconic heritage precincts, and there was things raised about views from Arthur Circus. We've only got the developers' lovely renders, as all developer renders are lovely. You know, as a council that is the custodian of, you know, the famous Australian street of Hampton Road, Battery Point, we should be seeing the sort of the technical council model rather than the sort of the applicant's renders.
Appreciate that. Look, the development's only of a scale that wouldn't normally kind of trigger that requirement. So look, obviously the application's been going for some time, and it's kind of never seen as something that's been required for, I suppose, the officers to make an assessment to determine the appropriateness of the scale. Usually that is for buildings of significant scale to really see those kind of sight lines from distance in the larger kind of townscape. So yeah, we don't have that model today.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got other questions.
Okay,
yeah.
Lord Mayor.
Is the Heritage Officer available today for us to ask questions?
Yes, Senior Heritage Officer, so she's there.
Lovely, thank you. And UDAP, they had a second opportunity to look at, like, were their issues all resolved?
Yes, so they provide additional comments on this proposal. So some of the comments, essentially the bulk of the scale, they were satisfied that was okay. That there was some comment around that the development, the residential components of the development didn't have a front door, which kind of creates an extra level of kind of fine-grained design and active frontage. However, that was more a comment, but overall they still supported the proposal. But those comments are included as an attachment there, so they're additional to the previous assessment.
And I'm just wondering about the performance criteria that was raised with us on page 124 and 125. And I guess it's quite important because it doesn't meet the acceptable solution. So then the officers have gone to the performance criteria, and it does say that building design must enhance the streetscape by satisfying all of the following, and then there's A to H. And I'm just wondering why, there's only the one paragraph of description of how it satisfies the performance criteria, and given it's a very high bar of saying it must satisfy all of the performance criteria, I'm just wondering why we haven't got more advice on, you know, C, D, E, F, G, H. It sort of just seems to kind of only talk about the glazing. Is there a reason we couldn't get more advice on that?
Chair, look, I suppose it's important to note that criteria, so that criteria is really the objective of the criteria of what we're looking at is non-residential buildings. So I think that the assessment of that criteria of that urban mixed use zone is important to realise that those requirements, because the urban mixed use zone is dealing with residential and commercial kind of development, that these design criteria are really focused on non-residential use. Look, you know, agree that there's not a huge amount of assessment there. However, in terms of it's really focusing on the aspect of the shop, the general retail kind of shop, and that food services there.
Yeah, what I suggested, you know, people could take their points up in the discussion, in the debate.
They're questions, though. I just mean,
No, I'm saying, you know, with regards to those issues, you know, you can take that in the debate. Any other questions?
Yeah, just on this issue of the excavation not being part of something that we would consider, Some years ago, we considered the Montpellier Retreat development, which had excavated car park, and my understanding was that was actually a significant part of the planning appeal and the planning assessment report. I mean, has something changed in the planning scheme in Sullivan's Cove or Battery Point? Because I would have thought, like, what's changed since that? Because that was a massive issue, and I think that's the reason the appeal got upheld, was around excavation.
Yeah, so that issue, it was obviously a huge issue, but it wasn't essentially a planning issue. That issue was, I believe, that we ended up going through to the Supreme Court, and it was basically on this issue of excavation, but it's not, the excavation and those works are not part of the planning approval process, although it was a big issue, but it was not part of that kind of planning matters. It was essentially another issue, and that's why it got pursued through the Supreme Court, from my memory.
Councillor Howie.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of other additional things which we haven't touched on yet, but just to confirm, the view from Arthur's Circus, which was suggested will be, the view of Mount Wellington will be obstructed by this proposal. That's not a planning issue. There's no cones or whatever we've called them towards maintaining vistas. There's no maintenance of a vista from that area, view line to the mountain.
That's correct.
Okay, so there's no grounds there. The building process impact, that's not a planning issue either. I understand that's to do with the next stage.
Correct.
So there's no grounds there we could refuse this development on. The stormwater issue was raised as well, where South Street, I think they said, was awkward because it didn't have the capacity to take away stormwater, so Hampton Road would be the main stormwater outlet. Is that an issue for the planning DA?
No, that was seen as an appropriate response.
Okay. The contamination was challenged, spoke about, and the response was that it's an old pub, a 200-year-old site, and that a lot of that contamination is lead. And I would imagine that all of Battery Point is covered in lead. If you've been sanding boards that are old and taking paint off walls and hosing down your tin roof in order to repaint it. So is lead a contamination issue across Battery Point, and this site is no different to many other places in Battery Point, in your opinion? And is it a planning issue?
Yeah, the contamination is a planning issue to kind of a term appropriate of use and development, but it's largely from fill. Largely, a lot of the contamination in that report is from fill, and I think that would, you're correct, I think that would affect a number of properties throughout Battery Point.
Mm-hmm. And also the height, bulk and scale was questioned as well, with the height exceeding an 8.5 metre height. What's the acceptable solution for height there?
So there's two aspects to it. So the main height for a mixed use zone is the permitted acceptable solution is 10 metres, and then it drops to 8.5 metres within 10 metres of the boundary, noting that in a residential zone there is actually a permitted maximum height of 9.5 metres.
So what area of, how much proportion or what percentage of this site exceeds both the acceptable solution?
Tricky to give you a percentage.
It's not like it's across the whole site. There's a smaller area that exceeds.
That's correct. I think there's the elevation that shows that 10 metre line, and where the drops down in the plans is probably the best way to get a visual of what that percentage is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. All right. So a lot of the issues raised by the representatives weren't planning issues. Some were, some weren't. So I think I've answered all. Well, you've answered all those questions about what's in the planning scheme and what's not in the planning scheme, and what objections we don't look at.
Thank you. Deputy?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, through you. I'm just reading page 705 of the supporting information that we had from UDAP. I'm just going to read it, and then I was just wondering if you could clarify something for me. Regarding design and materials, the panel repeats their previous note acknowledging the importance of this site to the precinct and the responsibility that comes with that in any future detailed refinement of this proposal. Can you just it said that, and then the next paragraph was regarding the panel's previous concern raised toward the basement car park entry, including walls and screening over council-owned land off Kelly Street. The panel's previous comments remain applicable. And because I couldn't find what their previous concern was, could you tell me what UDAP's previous concern was regarding the basement? Because the basement car park entry?
We might be able to see if we can find, find that. We might be able to find that.
Sure, happy to go to somebody else and get back to me.
So yeah,
sure.
in terms of that first aspect, in terms of the materials, there is a heritage condition on there talking about the kind of refinement of the material. So yeah, that would be something that can be considered at that stage. But yeah, we'll see if we can find that for you.
Yeah, that'd be good. And sorry, and just had one more final one because it sort of confused me a little bit. Which again was on page 708 of the supporting documents, and maybe this is a heritage question, I'm not really sure, but it was just with reference regarding heritage and the response to the concern that had been raised from the representation. The response, which is I'm assuming is our response, was that height requirements for the zone provisions are not considered in the Historic Heritage Code. Can you explain that to me or just a little bit?
Yeah, so yeah, it is quite confusing. The in the Battery Point Heritage Precinct area, it hands over the assessment of kind of height in that BP1 area to the Heritage Code, and really refers to kind of heritage being the kind of the governing aspect of that when it comes to that inner residential zone.
Yep. So when it says
sorry.
So when it says that heritage requirements of the zone provisions are not considered, the answer to that is the code, the heritage code requirements for height was not considered. We actually used it instead in the planning scheme. Is that what you mean?
So it's just in the inner residential zone, which I think that discussion was talking about 46 South Street.
Yeah, that house, yeah.
Yeah, so just checking here. So that... yeah, so that the residential zoned aspects, hand over the dealing with height to the Heritage Code. And that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Lord Mayor, you have another question?
Oh, I just want to ask the Heritage Officer some questions.
Yes.
If I can.
Make sure you speak to the mic because they're not picking up there.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I'm just Heritage Precinct that we're, like the Hampden Road Heritage Precinct. Is it a Heritage Precinct at all? What sort of, how would you assess this fits in with the rules of the Heritage Precinct? These are our rules. I'm not sure.
Through you, Chair, the entire site is within the Battery Point Heritage Precinct, BP1. So the provisions pertaining to heritage precincts only apply. There are no provisions that relate to heritage places. They are not applicable. So the essential provisions are to do with demolition. There is also a provision to do with the new work. There's also a provision to do with extensions to a building within a heritage precinct. And then the provisions to do with Battery Point that are specific to Battery Point apply, and there are a number of those.
So I guess there was a suggestion that, you know, this is such an important streetscape, and I think that one of the reasons we put in the heritage precincts around the city is to do with the streetscape. So I guess from the perspective of streetscape, were the heritage officers comfortable with the impact on the streetscape?
So the definition of streetscape is given in the planning scheme. It's a fairly tight provision.
So when you say the planning scheme, do you mean under the heritage precinct elements of the planning scheme?
No, it applies to the whole of the planning scheme. So the definition of a heritage precinct relates to and refers back to streetscape and townscape qualities, and streetscape is defined within the planning scheme.
And can you just what was the heritage officer's assessment of the impact of the development on streetscape? And also, can you provide any comments around the concerns around Arthur Circus and whether this might be visible from the Arthur Circus? Because I presume, given it's all heritage precinct, there is some relevance or commentary on that in your assessment.
So the definition of a streetscape is essentially, as the planning scheme states, within 100 metres of the subject site. So our assessment has determined that the streetscape does not extend into Arthur Circus. It is the visual quality of the proposal when viewed from the street, and if you were to extend that line and measurement from the subject site, it doesn't extend, unfortunately, into Arthur Circus. So it is along Hampton Road, along Kelly Street and South Street.
And what was the heritage officer's assessment of the impact on streetscape?
So the assessment is that given that there is the assessment was that the design and siting of the precinct, the design requires assessment against the clause E13.8.2P1, and it says that design and siting of buildings and works must not result in detriment to the significance of the precinct, as listed in table E13.2. And there are 3 statements of significance for the precinct in Battery Point, and the determination by officers was that it is a series of contemporary forms that reflects the form of 2.5-storey Victorian Georgian buildings with attic elements located directly on a street frontage. So in essence it is emulating, that typical Battery Point form, however in a contemporary way.
Okay, and thank you. And just on the Arthur Circus view issue, can you provide any commentary on it? Because unfortunately we don't have a fly-through, so I don't know. I've got no advice on that at all. And I know we've considered developments previously that impact on the Arthur Circus view, and it has been a planning issue. So I'm just a bit curious about how this has happened.
Yeah, so it is this definition within the planning scheme that does refer to the 100 metres. So yes, there have been decisions within Arthur Circus which has looked at, or an assessment's looked at the streetscape, and that would be within Arthur Circus itself.
And so do you have any understanding of whether there is an impact from Arthur Circus of the view to?
The Heritage Code doesn't require us to consider
You just don't know. Well, none of us know.
So there has been a photo montage.
Can I just, I think, the questions should be asked instead of a dialogue going on.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Montage, apparently. There's a montage.
Yeah, there is a photo montage that I believe has been submitted. I would take some time to find it, which actually showed the development from Arthur Circus. But as I said, the Heritage Code does not require us to consider, as it is outside the 100 metres, and it doesn't require us to consider any view cones towards the mountain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, there was a question that Councillor Lohberger was going to ask, and I think there's an answer coming here. Answer coming for the deputy as well, and I think Alderman Zuko has a question. So we'll go to Councillor Lohberger first.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions have been asked about the proposal itself, but I did have a process question. Just when people put in submissions, are they able to tick a box that says that they consent to it becoming public or not?
That's correct, yeah. Yes.
So if they do tick the yes box, is there a problem in then revealing their submission if asked about it, say at a council meeting?
As long as that information is kind of available to us at the time to confirm that, sure, no problems.
Okay, I'm aware that someone who submitted made a submission that was asked about by Alderman Zuko did actually say yes, and the information was denied. So,
Councillor Alderman Zuko.
He asked a very, very good question, and it's basically been, there's been a lot of discussion about height and bulk and whatever have you. And then the disruption to the site, the building to the site, the environmental impacts and everything like that. It's been stated that the height is 2.7 metres above height in certain areas, correct or incorrect?
That's incorrect. I believe it was
Well, that's what's been stated.
Yeah, I believe that was 1.7. 1 second.
So can you just clarify 1.7?
So the proposal includes a maximum height of 11.2 metres in sections, and there's also the discretion in terms of the building reaching up to 10 metres within that 8.5 metre section of the
So
residential.
we're somewhere between 1.5 to 1.7?
Yes,
okay?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's not correct, Matt.
It's okay, that's fine. You had your sense, so it's just the discussion over here.
So my question is this. If you reduce the height of this by 1.7 metres, will the impact on building on the site change dramatically?
Through you, Chair, look, speaking on an officer's behalf, that assessment I think would be very, very minor and with a very minor difference in the overall impact of the development.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry to do this, but if 8.5 is the required and it's at 11.2, is that right?
Through you, Chair. So there's two aspects of it. So that section does drop down lower. So the elevations that show the red line showing that kind of height is probably the best way to get an indication of the level of encroachment of the height.
So sorry, it's not 11.2 metres high.
To the front in the section of the site that's within the mixed use zone. So that's the higher part of the bulk of the site is towards the front in the mixed use zone, beyond that 10 metre setback.
Thank you. Now, there was an answer that was going to come for the deputy, I think. Have you found that answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so just referring to that basement, so they did have concern. So the panel raised concern in regard to the basement car park entry. Several apparent reasons, noting firstly the car park entry structure and ramping is proposed to be on council-owned land, including the walls and screening. Secondly, that these structures may obstruct the sensitive views along Kelly Street and the impact on open space, opportunity and public realm of the area. And thirdly, that the proposed open-air basement car park entry creates an unsightly element within a highly sensitive residential street, effectively creating a gap or a breakage in the heritage pattern. That was their original comment, and that was obviously their updated comment that was included in the
So
document.
those comments, and then we're now reading their new commentary, is basically that those issues have not been addressed in the new DA.
Referring back to their comments, 1 second.
Page 705, I think it is. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so they just refer specifically in this one towards the basement car park entry, including the walls and the screening over council land off Kelly Street. So the previous comments remain applicable.
So that issue has not been updated or modified or addressed at all in this new DA?
Yeah, not to a level that changed the UDAP's view.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lord Mayor.
Is that because it's sort of like a big double, story, a double in and out, sort of more modern car park entrance with a roller door or something? Or?
Through your chair, that's right. I suppose it's an excavation, so you've got that kind of open air, more modern underground car park element. Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, there was reference to a photo montage being available to help us understand the Arthur Circus issue.
Through your chair, which reference is that?
Oh, sorry, the Heritage Officer said there wasn't photo montage available. I think it's relevant if the community is concerned about it and...
Planning committee.
Planning committee includes discretion and considering community representations, which I'm doing. Thank you. Arthur Circus montage?
So it's included in the renders provided in the plans. So there is a montage kind of looking towards the building.
Yeah.
Find that page for you.
Yes, please.
That's the version, isn't it?
Is this from the DA?
Yeah, so this is from the DA, but...
Excuse me, this, we've already had the opportunity for...
I just wanted to look at it.
It's in the development.
So excuse me, can you just wait? We will have to control the meeting. We just can't have everybody talking and moving around. So if there's something you want to give, please give it to the secretary here and she will pass it on to you. So if you have something that you want to give, please pass it to the secretary and then she will pass it on to the elected members. Otherwise it becomes too unruly.
Just the page number's fine, I'll look at that.
Page 21 of the development application, if I got it right.
If you, oh. Ah. Let's see. Okay.
274 on the agenda.
And then we don't have a montage standing in Arthur Circus.
Yes, that's shown on page 274 of the agenda attachments. It's got an existing and proposed, so it's showing the view on the entrance to Arthur Circus coming from Salamanca.
But not standing in the actual park.
No, that's right.
The public.
Okay, any other questions that people want to ask? No, okay. I have just got a few very quick questions. Question number one, page 176, 6.15.4. Is there any any written advice received from the road authority? Page 176, 6.15.4.
So the road authority have assessed it and provided those conditions. So there's a number of kind of conditions there dealing with the.
Okay, all right. And the second question, 6.16.5, page 180, I think it is. I'll just read what it says. And there is a relatively large pool of available parking in Kelly Street, Hampton Road, and connecting streets. Do we have any evidence with regards to that? There is a relatively large pool of available parking in Kelly Street, Hampton Road, and connecting streets. Do we have any evidence by that survey was done and when it was done?
There was a traffic engineer's report that was done for that assessment, but also council officers have assessed that. I think they're referring to the large amount of permit parking that's available. That's obviously in high demand, but it is available. Essentially, that's the development engineer's comments there.
All right, and the final question is, there is a handicap parking space near Jackman McGrath, I'm sorry. Will that stay, will it remain?
So it's not proposed, is that those kind of changes essentially would be proposed outside of the planning application process, unless there was major works kind of involving its removal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, someone would like to move the recommendation or have an hotel moved by the deputy? Okay. Now, debate and discussion.
I'll start the ball rolling. I've got to say, when you look at the before and after, if I was a first-time visitor in Battery Point, and I walk past that building, after walking through Battery Point, I'll be saying, I've got to say to you, every time I've been there, Prince of Wales always said, what an ugly building. One of the most ugliest buildings that I consider in Battery Point. Not only it's an ugly building, but it's also got an ugly car park around it. I think people know my viewpoints about open car parks. I'd rather see buildings above open car parks. And I am one that has been supporting density for years and will continue to support density. The developers are very, very lucky, because if the original hotel, which I've got on my screen right now, was built or still there, I wouldn't be supporting that building being demolished. But this 1965-66 building, as far as I'm concerned, can go. The 60s and 70s architecture was probably the worst I've ever seen in my entire life. When I actually look at the 1845 building, it actually fits in with that corner site, that corner building that's there. If you actually look at it, look at that corner, it's a modern version of the old original pub. And if we want to talk about streetscape, the reality of streetscape is when you're walking in a street, you don't want to be walking past an open, empty car park. To my point of view, streetscape is walking down the road where everything has the same feeling. In Battery Point, everything is built to the edge, or not just about everything, mostly everything's built to the edge, if not far back from the edge. I actually have looked at all the different sides of the street, and even looked at the D'Angelo's, which is a setback from D'Angelo's there. I actually believe when you're walking down Hampden Street, you're going to get a far better feel in the whole street when you're walking down and you're walking back up, and you're not going to see this ugly 1960s building. So, like any development, no matter whether you reduce the height, whether you reduce the bulk, whether you take away some car parking, add some car parking somewhere else, there's going to be issues with building. And that's a reality. And that normally occurs at the early stages. And there are strict guidelines insofar as building and building like this. And I know I had an empty site next to me in North Hobart, in which the Chinese Community Centre built, and they built right to my edge. Their building is about 1 inch from my building. In actual fact as well, they built over a window which can never be used again, but I accepted that because we got lighting from the top, and that would have been detrimental to the building. So I had concerns myself that maybe when excavation happened, they're doing things next to me, but that comes down the track of the building aspect of it, and no doubt this will happen here. And when you look at the building that they're going to be building close to there, which is D'Angelo's, it looks like at least 1.5 metres away, which is far different to when someone built right next to me. I actually prefer what is being proposed. The sooner you demolish that ugly thing in Battery Point, the better. I understand that, like anything, change does create angst amongst the community, but I believe this is actually when this is finished and completed, going to be a far better streetscape than already exists there right at this point in time. But it's going to be a short-term pain for long-term gain. I fully support.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I support a lot of the things that Alderman Zuko has said. I don't find this proposal offensive in any way. I think the laneway between the two retail areas, between the cafe and the retail space, I think that's a nice piece of separation of the building to break it up, to make it look like it's not a monolithic kind of, or whole wall canyoning kind of thing. The units I can't talk about, but the design, the facade, I am comfortable with. A lot of the things that the representative spoke about, I do understand the concerns. They weren't part of the development application process. They weren't part of the planning. So it's not to dismiss those concerns, but we can't evaluate this development based on those issues. Because if we did choose to support those issues and say, well, let's vote against this DA, it's undefendable in a tribunal. Would that be the case through you, Chair, to the manager there?
Through you, Chair, yeah. At the directions hearing, they will determine what the valid grounds of appeal are, and they need to be relating to relevant planning discretions.
Mm-hmm. And the discretions there, the performance criteria that some of these elements are based on are defendable in a tribunal as well. They're not so far away from the performance criteria that they would negate this, that they would be used to reject this proposal.
Through you, yeah, that's the officer's assessment that there is satisfies performance criteria and is within a reasonable scope.
Mm-hmm. So there's not really any grounds for refusal here. It would be our judgment as a planning authority if we wanted to say, well, I reject this, but we couldn't defend it. And what happens in a tribunal if a committee does vote against the officer's recommendation? What's the process? What would happen after that?
We would engage a planning consultant if the recommendation by the committee is contrary to the officer's recommendation. So we would need to engage consultants to address those areas where there is a differing opinion.
And from my experience of being here a few years, when that has occurred, often we haven't been able to find a consultant to defend a refusal against officer's recommendation. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, look, I haven't got all those stats on me, but I think the criteria do, you know, they allow a subjective kind of assessment, so there could be differing opinions, but
so
have good faith in our officers' assessment that they've done a good job. So I think there may be some issues.
Yeah. The point I'm making, though, to refuse it would mean it would end up coming back to us, I think, and the refusal would be replaced with an approval as it went through the process. I don't think there's grounds to refuse this, and I wouldn't refuse it anyway, because I think it's quite a reasonable development. The car parking is a big issue for a lot of people. A lot of people would rather not see that car park, but I do understand the requirements of the developers. Also, those car parking spaces take X number of cars off the road, potentially competing with other car parking in the street. So I'm satisfied that that's okay. So I'll be supporting this tonight, but I do have sympathies for the representatives who had a lot of issues with it, but I'm also comfortable that this is a development application that does stand up against the planning scheme.
Councillor Kitsos.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I agree with my colleague, Councillor Harvey. I think this is an incredibly difficult application to assess. I think it's an incredibly challenging site to put in an application on due to the planning scheme and the heritage, the unique heritage qualities of this particular area. For me, it's about our job as planning authority. So we've heard tonight that we cannot take into consideration excavation concerns, that contamination will be managed during the construction process and is a relatively standard process. It's pretty, it's not unusual to find contaminated soils, particularly in our heritage areas. I understand that the lead has come from the paint from the previous building that has been demolished, and I know that we have enough mechanisms in place to adequately test those soils and to put in the scientifically proven methods to protect the neighbourhood from the contamination that will be brought out of the site. I really think that construction management plan needs to be the best one we've ever done in this really precious and delicate and important heritage area of the city. I would be nervous if I was a neighbour that my house is going to crack on short piers and limestone render, but again, it's not something that I'm allowed to consider tonight under the planning scheme, although I am very empathetic. Look, ultimately, I have to trust the officers' advice. We have qualified officers across all levels of our organisation. We've heard from our senior heritage officer tonight. We've heard that the heritage code takes into consideration demolition, takes into consideration new work, extensions, and has specific provisions for Battery Point, and yet still they've recommended that this building in its design has gone far enough to meet that code. So that satisfies my concerns there. I think overall my interpretation of the UDAP report is that they're generally supportive. I'm still not quite sure why we couldn't have got to the 40% glazing that's required under the passive surveillance, or had front doors on the apartments that are street side, but these design decisions again are not the role of the planning authority. So I will be approving the development tonight, and I think that the proponent has done a fair number of steps to indicate that they're serious in trying to please the community. They want a really good outcome for Hampton Road. They're not putting an excessive amount of car parking. They're actually 22 car parks short of the scheme, although there are discretionary uses there, of course. I would highly encourage them to put bicycle parking in of their own accord around the retail and cafe precinct, because it will encourage more users into the area, and also to potentially use one of those car parks in the basement so that people who are using those short stay accommodations can also have some alternative micro-mobility options available to them. But overall, I think that this is a welcome change to an otherwise underutilised site.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand the concerns of the residents. I've been through a few of these exact issues in North Hobart, living in an old heritage area, and new buildings being built opposite to me. I've also done construction work myself, adding new to old, and at the development application process, I copped a lot of flack over that. But once things had settled down, people appreciated the work that had been done. I believe that the work that's presented to us today is professional. It addresses the concerns. I rely heavily on the Urban Design Advisory Panel, the expert panel of architects that gives us advice, and they deem this to be appropriate, to quote them. And sightlines, issues which I've raised, not an issue. All these other multiplicity of concerns, not an issue. Car parks, people say they don't want to see that there. Well, that's exactly it. You won't see it. I just think this is a huge plus, and I think the applicant should be congratulated, because this is going to cost a fortune for those to do, and it's not our concern whether it costs $10,000 a park or $100. They're going to do that, and how can anyone criticise them for putting car parks underground? I just don't get that. If I was a neighbour, I'd be very happy, because guess what? They'd only be parking on the street and making noise upstairs, doors closing and all that. It's all going to be confined. Most of it's been said. Look, the applicants are people they're local people, they're our people. It's not a Singaporean or European conglomerate dropping in and out and just off they go. They've had 3 goes at this now. They live in this area. They know the people, and they're going to continue living there, and they work there, some of these people. So it is difficult. I know as a planning authority, we're not going to make many friends with the residents of Battery Point, which is unfortunate, and I find that difficult. But as part of my job, if I want to do this properly, I have no choice. I have absolutely no choice but to approve the development application. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Yeah, I can say a few words. I'm still interested to listen to any further discussion. I think there are really good things about this application. I'm okay with the Hampden Road treatment, although again agree about the doors would have been good, but we're not seeing much of the renders from the South Street or the Kelly Street, and there's a reason for that, because it's a less sophisticated design approach. It's a big modern box out the back, and I think that's not a great outcome. Like, it would have been nice to have that sort of same treatment right around all 3 sides of the building. That would have been the exemplar, which is this amazing national treasure that is Battery Point. So I think it looks good from one angle, but I'm not so sure about South Street and Kelly Street. I'm really quite disappointed about whatever we've done with the whole parking discussions. Again, in places like this all over the country, there's a tendency for councils to negotiate down parking requirements to get design excellence and to help reduce the need for both the cost of underground parking and the disruption of it, and really, I think 37 car parks is complete overkill for 2 townhouses and 13, visitor apartments. So I think that was, that's obviously allowed. I think I don't think it's the best outcome, and I think we could have avoided the issues that UDAP has found on Kelly Street if we hadn't pursued, if we'd really tried to work with the owner to find a solution like they did, for example, with the Rocks apartments in Elizabeth Street. No underground car parking, very little parking at all in those apartments, and you know that's really high design quality. So the Kelly Street entrance and exit, as UDAP has identified, is probably certainly it's not a great outcome at all. I'm also disappointed that that our heritage precinct again doesn't feel like we've really got I do think it's important to think about places like Arthur Circus. I think we need our own. This is a national treasure. I would have liked to have seen officer-generated renders to give me some confidence standing in Arthur Circus, taking that photo that everyone wants to do. That I'm not going to see a sort of boxy, glazed, modern building sitting on top of the heritage roof lines. I think possibly we are going to see that, but I don't know because I don't have the advice. So I'm pretty uncomfortable about that because that's the kind of thing that people will say, that was, what's happened to Arthur Circus? But I don't know. I have to kind of go with, one person says I've got a few funny little drawings and no advice on that. So I'm pretty uncomfortable about that. And I think for anything in a sort of iconic national heritage precinct, regardless of whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories, I think using our model, that's what it's for. And we have used the model for quite small buildings, I think in Gladstone Street previously and others. But just again, because these are really important streetscapes for the character of Hobart. So I'm not really very happy with it. I'm happy with some elements of it. There's big things I'm not happy about. I would like there to be some more things in the conditions about, or just making sure that the construction management plan is available to the residents. I do think we need to have the hoardings have to be solid, not just fence like they've got up at the KFC site at the moment. And that has to, because this will be, there for 2 years, and this is a tourism hotspot, so it needs to look really good, or as good as it possibly can for the 2 years potentially that it's a building site. So I think I'll listen to the further debate, but I don't know whether there's sufficient grounds to refuse it. But I'm not happy with all elements of the project.
Any other speakers? No one else. Councillor Lawler.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies, I'm struggling a little bit with a serious dental issue at the moment. Look, I think there's a lot to like about this particular proposal, but there are some issues for me. Obviously, as it's been pointed out, a number of these are not planning issues. Obviously, the car park is a big problem for the community. The problem I have, though, is in Battery Point of all suburbs, we're going over the building height, in my view, and I don't like to see this sort of erosion of heights. You get someone going over it by a bit now, sets a precedent, the next building can go over by a bit more, and so on. I'm really not a fan. I do wish that the building actually had been a bit more compatible. I think I echo the Lord Mayor's comments there, in that just the size of it is just where it's too high. It is bulky, it is big. And yes, we are short a little bit of images from that southern side to actually see what that means. But look, on the basis of everything we've heard, like everybody else, I'm really struggling with the decision to make here, but I personally, I think, will fall on the decision of voting against it on the basis of the height. I think the height, as is well known with me, it is an issue. And in Battery Point of all places, I just simply can't support something that goes over the height limit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll be very
Kelly.
quick. I'm not struggling with this application because I believe it complies with the planning scheme, which is the core focus, and the bulk of the representations relate to things which are not in scope of the planning scheme, and I think it'll be a fantastic improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. And Deputy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Look, this was actually a really difficult decision. It's so difficult to make these decisions where we have our planning authority hat on, but we also have to consider some of the comments that have been made and concerns from the community. So balancing all of those perspectives, I think, sitting here as planning authority is really incredibly difficult. And I do understand where the community is coming from and have engaged with them at various different moments around their concerns and heard their issues, and I do want to thank them for their time and for pointing out their concerns to us. I do also look at it from the broader perspective of we have to sit here and make our judgment and our decision based on the facts around us being a planning authority. And I just wanted to talk about the building height. I do understand how that could potentially be an issue. From my recollection, it was where it was supposed to be 8 something, it's actually 10 something. Where it was supposed to be 10 something, it's actually 11 something. And then so now we apply the performance criteria because it doesn't fall strictly within that acceptable solution, and that's where our discretion comes in on that 1 metre something or that 2 metre something. And just having a look at the various different planning and blueprints and how it would look overall, and applying all of those aspects and that criteria that our planning authority, our planning officers have, I find it very difficult to say no. I find it very difficult to disapprove this. I then thought to myself, well, what I'll do, Chair, is that I'll have a look at the various different conditions that the officers have put in as well. And there are some really significant conditions that relate to hours of operation, lighting, noise, visitor accommodation management plan, heritage regarding fences, fabric, colours, materials and finishes, protection of council assets, vehicle barriers, there's parking and access design, there's also conditions on waste management plans, stormwater pump station and various different aspects of the stormwater, as well as different criteria and components of the environmental health, so things like the site assessment reports and so forth, and of course crucially traffic and construction management. I haven't listed the whole host of it, but that's the overall in terms of the criteria and the topics that are covered within the conditions. So I find it very difficult to disapprove this tonight, Chair, and I do understand the concerns once again, and I want to thank my fellow colleagues around the table as well for their commentary on this particular development application, and I thought we all handled it really well, really maturely and really professionally. The only comment I didn't like, which I think should have been handled with a little more professionally, is saying, look, these people are locals, it's not somebody coming from a Singaporean conglomerate. I just find that really, I remember Alderman Zuko and I had issues previously, I think, around people saying something around, oh, it's not local, it's not, this is years and years ago. So I just didn't really appreciate that comment, and I thought I would make that known. Overall, thank you so much, and thank you to the officers as well.
Is there anyone else? I don't think there's anyone else, so just me. Now, as already been stated, it is our role to look at this with the hat of the planning authority. Now, I totally agree that there are issues that has been brought up, for example, excavation and a number of others, that is not the purview of the planning authority. So let's leave that alone, and I'm not going to go there. What I will do as an elected member, it is my role to look at the report that comes to us with critical eye and examine it closely. So I want to look at a number of issues from a planning perspective as presented to us by the staff. Firstly, clause D1143P1, and this is what it says. The performance
what's your
criteria clause D43P1B provides as follows: that the private open space that is a size and with dimension appropriate for the size of the dwelling and is able to accommodate a number of things. That open space, according to this criteria, should be able to operationally meet the needs of the clothes drying, storage, planting of gardens, and landscaping. Now, if you look at that, and the space that's provided, 7.0 meters by 3.4 meters, the staff statement is this: the space can be expected to facilitate operational needs of residents, including outdoor clothes drying and gardening. The operative term for me and for all of us to look at is this: that the space can be expected. Now, the word expected is very interesting, I think, because what it is doing, it is simply saying that it is realistically not possible to accommodate all those things. Gardening, storage, landscaping, clothes drying, etc. The term expected suggests a level of optimism. It is an assumption about the space's capacity that may not be entirely realistic. And so the word itself, I'm not bringing that in there. I'm simply looking at the word that is used by staff, that it is expected to facilitate. So realistically, it's not able to, because they are making an assumption. And for me to make a decision, I've got to look at evidence before me. Let me go over to clause 15.3.1P2. And it reads that the noise emissions must not cause environmental harm. Now, the staff considers the noise levels, and here are the words: that the locality and that basis unlikely to cause environmental harm. Note those words very carefully, because we're looking at it critically. It is unlikely to cause environmental harm. Now, the clause, if you read it, does not provide for a subjective assessment. So we shouldn't be using the word likelihood, because it is an objective test. It states very clearly what the objective test is. Will the noise level cause environmental harm? And we have talked about it. The environmental harm can be pollution. It can be noise. So can we ascertain beyond any unreasonable doubt that noise emission won't cause harm? And I think we ought to apply the precautionary principle here, because the staff is saying to us it is unlikely, but the test is objective. Don't bring in a subjective element to look at this. Let me move on to the next point. Point number 3. Clause 15.4.3 P1 states that the building design must enhance the streetscape by satisfying all of the following. The two terms that are very, very important for us to make these decisions, to look at this critically, is the word must, which is mandatory, and all. That means including all and excluding none from elements A to element E. Now, if you look at it, this implies, in my view, a strict test. The statement here by staff is this, that it extends the fenestration, therefore it is considered appropriate. That's the word they're using. It is considered it is considered appropriate. Now what does this mean when I read it critically is this, that implies there is some degree of discretion or subjectivity. Now, with the clauses here, A to E, they're very clear. It needs to comply with all the elements because it must satisfy all, and there is no room for subjective interpretation, and that's what it is doing. It is a subjective interpretation. We had that earlier. Let me move on to another point. Point number 4, clause E 5.51P3, and it states, any increase in vehicle traffic at any existing access or junction must be safe and not unreasonably impact on the efficiency of the road. Now, it is my understanding, I haven't found it, that I says any written advice received from the road authority. Now, I haven't read it. I've looked for it and I haven't found it. So, therefore, I'm saying if we need to take all this, we must take all these points, A to I, into consideration. That it must be safe and it not or should not unreasonably impact on the efficiency of the road having regard to the following. And I think it is going to have an impact. And that leads me to my final point. If you look at clause E661A1, which is the acceptable solution, it is very objective. It says very clearly that the requirement for car spaces is 59. It's an objective test. But the proponents are only supplying 37. And so there's a shortfall of 22. So we've looked at the acceptable solution, which is objective test. It does not satisfy, so we take the application and put it under performance criteria. And when we put that under performance criteria, you will see now, so we finished with the acceptable solution. It's failed. Now we need to put this under the test to see if it passes the performance criteria. And the performance criteria E661P1 states, the number of on-site car parking spaces must be sufficient to meet the reasonable needs of users having regard to all of the following, from A to M. Quite a lot of criteria that you've got to satisfy. Now, if you look at A, car parking demand, the evidence is very clear. We have heard it from the representatives, and from my own anecdotal experience when I go there, it is impossible sometimes to find parking. So that doesn't meet the performance criteria. The availability of on-street and public car parking in the locality, really, there isn't. So it's not meeting that criteria as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not looking at issues pertaining to non-planning issues. I've left them alone. I've simply gone on to the performance criteria and have looked at what the staff has said and looked at it on that point of view. And therefore, I will find it difficult to support it on the basis of that. I will now put the recommendation to vote. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Aye. Those in favour? Against?
Councillor Lohberger and Councillor Dutta.
It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for those of you who have been here. I need to take a break for 5 minutes, and I'm wondering if you could nominate Councillor Harvey to chair this. Thank you.
We're going to... That's the vote that I chair.
Yeah. Yeah, oh no, we didn't. Yeah, I moved that Councillor Harvey chair.
Can you open the door, please? Can't shut the door.
Moving on to item 4.11, which is 22 Anglesey Street, South Hobart. Partial demolition, alterations, extension, outbuilding and changes to front fence. Are there any deputations on this item? No deputations. Would somebody like to commence the discussion or move the item? Thank you, Gemma. Thank you. Councillor Kitsos, are you moving it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll move the item and start discussion.
Thank you.
Look, I'm really pleased with this development application. I think this is, we've talked a lot about heritage tonight, and this is another area of Hobart which has amazing heritage qualities, and the representations for this development question the heritage or reflect on the heritage qualities of this particular building and the necessity to do an extension or a renovation. I actually think that this is what we need, these applications are what we need more of to actually retain the heritage quality of our suburbs. These extensions allow families to continue to live in these spaces. They allow them to become warmer and more viable to modern conditions. So I'm really pleased to approve this application tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kitsos. Any other comments on this item? Councillor Lohberger.
I'll just echo some of Councillor Kitsos's comments. I think that this particular development, it's not that obvious from the front of the street, from the streetscape. I don't believe it really affects the look of the building all that much. It's something we've seen a lot of with a modern development out the back of a heritage property. It makes the house so much more livable for those who are in it. And I think they've actually done it in quite a clever fashion, to be honest, looking at it. Which allows a bit of sunlight to get onto both sides of the house that wouldn't otherwise be there. I really can't see anything to object to on this particular development. And as Councillor Kitsos says, I think it will be great to see more of these. I've just done a similar development to my 1926 house, and it's 10 times warmer in winter and a lot cooler in summer. These are really useful developments that actually enliven the older part of the house as well. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Lohberger. Any other comments from around the table? If there's no further debate, then I'll put the item. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item is item... Oh, hang on, my computer's just updating. Thank you. Next item is item 4.1.2, 136 Wentworth Street, South Hobart, alterations, lighting and upgrades to the park there.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Sherlock.
Oh, I was going to second it, but then I realised we don't need a seconder. Yep. I do have a comment though. We've been through this debate before. I noticed this particular debate is a little bit different because the towers are quite a bit shorter, and we'll actually be replacing, not replacing, but we're getting this application instead of those 28-metre tall towers. My concerns are exactly the same as the last time, but I hope the staff pay a bit of attention to any light spill and appropriately shield the lights if it does turn out that they, because we know they're going to be brighter. We've heard that they can be directed downwards better, so there's less spill. But because they are brighter, I just think just some attention needs to be paid to how the light spills once they're in operation. And I noticed the application talks about making sure they don't get knocked out of alignment, in which case they really will spill light.
Blown out of alignment maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the staff have put some really good conditions on this. I'm particularly happy with them sort of talking about getting a contact person for the community if there are light spill issues. And it sounds to me like they can control the lights potentially from their phone, so they may be able to address issues on the spot. Yeah, nothing. Again, I think it's a good application. It's needed. I know that there are some people who are unhappy about it who are nearby to the ground. However, I actually do think potentially there is a really high potential for there to be less light, not more, spilling out. So I'm quite supportive of this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loberg. And I'll just note that Councillor Dutta has re-entered the room. Any other comments on this? There being no further comments, I'll put the item. All those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I'll declare the ayes have it. Carried. Next is item. I'll just note that Alderman Zirl. I'll start again. That Alderman Zuko and Councillor Sherlock are leaving the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. We're on to item 5, which is reports. Would somebody like to move the delegated decision report? Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Any comments on the delegated decision report? Thank you. There being no comments, I'll put the item. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Declare that carried unanimously. Item 5.2 is the Planning Advertised Applications Report. Moved by Councillor Dutta. Any discussion? No, there being no discussion, I'll put that item. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Declare that carried unanimously. Responses to questions without notice. Would somebody like to move those? We'll go with Councillor Kitsos for that one. Short half head. No discussion on these, so I'll put that item. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Okay. Next item, I think, is the questions.
Oh, the special meeting, so there are no questions. Close the meeting.
Not that the report yet. Hang on. I'm just going back in.
So close.
All right. Sorry. Hang on. What's next?
So we close the meeting.
We have questions.
No, special meeting.
Special meeting, there are no questions. Okay, would someone move that we close the meeting?